The death of FBG Duck back in August 2020 was pretty shocking. Being a part of the Chicago hip-hop scene and rolling with Tookaville or O-Block has its own risk. But Duck getting taken out in broad daylight was something that had basically never happened before. There have been a bunch of rumors and reports alleging that King Von, who was one of Duck's major ops, was closely involved in the hit, and the attack taking place in the middle of the day meant that, unfortunately, people were around to see Duck get killed and capture it on camera. The beef between King Von and FBG Duck. The issues between King Von and FBG Duck run deep. As a matter of fact, their problems go back all the way to the 1970s, decades before either rapper was born, when a man named David Barksdale was the leader of a gang called the Devil Disciples. But once he was arrested in 1974, the group began to break off into smaller subgroups. There was a lot going on during this time, but I'm not going to get into too much detail about it. Anyway, by the time the 80s rolled around, the gang had broken up into two distinct sects, the Black Disciples and the Gangster Disciples. The war between the BDs and GDs is still going on today, and it has led to a ton of bloodshed. I will talk a little bit about that, but for now, just remember that King Von was a member of the Black Disciples, and FBG Duck was with the Gangster Disciples. This meant that even if they had never personally crossed paths with each other, their affiliations automatically made them enemies. The crazy thing is that Duck and Von were allegedly friends when they were growing up, but when Von's allegiance was thrown into question, he was jumped by Duck. This was what potentially gave birth to the hatred Von held for his former friend, and when we add all the bad blood between the BDs and GDs, well, it's a recipe for disaster. Another wrinkle in this story is the rise of drill rap. For those of you who might need a refresher on your rap history, guys like Lil Durk, Lil Reese, and Chief Keef are credited with making that subgenre popular in the first place. Keef, in particular, played a big role in this. Back in 2012, when he dropped his debut album titled Finally Rich, he would release two of drill rap's most iconic songs, Love Sosa and I Don't Like. A common theme in drill rap is a focus on violence and gang culture, and a lot of that can be traced back to the long-standing feud between the Black and Gangster Disciples. Now that drill rap had gained real mainstream popularity, both sides had another way of dissing and threatening their ops. Issues between Von and Duck really began to escalate after the death of a gangster disciple named Gakira Barnes. Despite being only 17 years old at the time of her death back in 2014, Barnes was arguably one of the most dangerous members of the GDs, having been linked to about a dozen murders. That list of victims also included one name that is going to pop up a little later, but that death would play a huge role in ensuring that the issues between both gangs would never really go away. But even beyond that, she was also allegedly tight with FBG Duck, so it's safe to say that her death rattled him. Barnes's killer, who also injured two other people in the shootout, would only be revealed to the general public in July 2021, but odds are that the streets knew just who was responsible from the very beginning. The Chicago Police Department released information about Barnes's murderer. Bear in mind that by the time this happened, Von and Duck had already died. The documents revealed that an unknown man had gone up to the victim, and the unknown offender then produced a handgun and began firing in the direction of the victims, striking all three. The unknown offender then was observed entering an unknown vehicle, making good his escape. The report would then go on to reveal that the shooter had been identified as Davon Bennett, better known to his fans as King Von. The rapper allegedly shot Barnes 10 times, and law enforcement knew he did it, but they did not have enough evidence to put him away. It was also reported that the killer was able to find Barnes because she had shared her live location on social media. This had become a bit of a trend because ops had used social media to track down people in the past as well. Anyway, the law might have failed to put Von away in this instance, but it probably served as a catalyst to deepen the hatred Duck felt for his op. As I had mentioned earlier, drill rap gave these gangsters another way of dissing each other, and both men did just that. Back in late February 2020, Von dropped a track titled Took Her to the O, in which he blatantly went after Duck. While talking about his op, he said, "Now I look up and I see a truck. It's just pulling up. Someone hopped out, a big goofy he trying to look tough." Duck did not take kindly to being called out like that and dropped his own track titled I'm from 63rd in early March 2020. The entire song was written to insult Von, with the main theme being that Durk didn't believe the BD rapper was on his level. While addressing Lil Durk in a verse, he rapped, "Lil Durk, why you send this little boy to play with me? Why you ain't do that shit yourself if you got something to say to me?" Stuff like this would keep happening between the Black and Gangster Disciples in general, but when they weren't working on diss tracks, they were bringing violence onto the streets. All that gang activity and bullets flying at a moment's notice earned the area another name, Chirac. The term, which combined the words Chicago and Iraq, was first used by a Chicago-based rapper named King Louie in one of his mixtapes back in 2012. It perfectly captured what it was like on the streets, and the term has stuck around for over a decade now. And honestly, it is a reputation that has been well earned. While things may be relatively calmer today, parts of the city were pretty much a war zone about a decade ago. 19 people were shot on O-Block, a sect of the Black Disciples, between June 2011 and June 2014. Two of those 19 people died, but no weapons were ever found and no charges were ever filed either. either. O Block is in an area called Parkway Gardens, which was once home to the former First Lady Michelle Obama. Things were pretty normal back then, but in the years that have passed, the area has become something of a settling spot for gangs. More recently, it has come under the control of the Black Disciples, while their rivals, the Gangster Disciples, control a neighborhood full of single-family homes close by. This close proximity means that even something like crossing the street can lead to a bullet in the head. The reason that I wanted to take a moment and talk about what things are like between the BDs and GDs on the streets is because it helps to understand what Von and Duck's day-to-day looked like. There was a shaky peace as long as both sides kept to themselves, but that rarely ever happened. Between diss tracks and aggressive tweets, peace was never really an option for them. And see, that's sort of the problem. With vague, arbitrary borders built between both sides and everyone on the edge of pulling a trigger, death would always be lurking just around the corner. The fact that King Von and FBG Duck have both passed away proves just that. However, the beef between both men still ran deeper than generic gang issues. I have already talked about petty issues from when they were growing up, and of course the diss track, but Duck, and to an extent even Von's deaths, were unfortunately inevitable at a point. As I get into it, you will discover just what Duck did to finally move Von into action, allegedly of course. Remember how Gakira Barnes was probably one of the most dangerous people in the Gangster Disciples? Well, the same can be said for King Von and his role in the Black Disciples. I will get into specifics a little later, especially in terms of how his actions relate to Duck. But let's just say that Von is one of the very few rappers to have a documentary that basically said they were a serial killer. A few months ago, Trap Lord Ross dropped a video titled King Von Rap's First Serial Killer. The documentary was extremely controversial because it likened Von to an actual serial killer, Ted Bundy, and the rapper's links to certain murders were weak at best. But despite all those misgivings, the video proved one thing without a shadow of a doubt. King Von was an extremely dangerous man. This meant that FBG Duck beefing with him could only end one way. Both men had been closely involved in other killings in the past that hadn't just felt personal to them, but had strongly influenced both gangs and the relationship between them as a whole. Von and Duck both crossed the line when it came to insulting each other and their gangs, but the Gangster Disciple rapper would go too far in one of his tracks, and that may have played a major role in his death. We will take a look at some of those lyrics, but before that, I want to take a minute and talk about the people whose deaths have had a profound impact on the BDs and GDs. Duck drags Odie and T-Roy through the mud. The story of FBG Duck's death and King Von's alleged involvement in it would be incomplete without acknowledging the roles Shondell Tuka Gregory and Odie Perry had to play in it. In the grand scheme of things, it is difficult to tell which side is at fault for the violence that has taken place between both gangs over the last decade or so. Every killing has been in retaliation for a previous killing, and there's only so long you can keep going back in time to see who set off the powder keg. But a death that really changed a lot was the murder of Tuka Gregory. He was a member of the Gangster Disciples who was shot dead at a Chicago bus stop in January 2011. At the time of the death, law enforcement reported that the attack on him was potentially in response to the murder of a member of the Black Disciples. See what I mean? One death leads to another. Anyway, Tuka's death could have easily been written off with a bunch of others as just the cost of doing business in Chirac, but the Black Disciples ensured that wouldn't happen. While the Gangster Disciples mourned his death and renamed a sect to Tookaville, their ops did everything in their power to drag his name through the mud. All of the major BD artists got in on the game. Guys like Chief Keef went in hard, but none of them went after Tuka as hard as King Von did. In his song titled How I Rock, Tuka Pack, Von rap. Finim caught Tuka getting off the bus. I know Tuka mad as hell, he probably tired of us, but when I die, find Tuka and I'ma beat him up. If that wasn't enough, the phrase smoking Tuka started being used to describe smoking marijuana. It started off with the BD rappers before getting picked up by other artists in the industry. That's right, the death of a 15-year-old kid was being used like a punchline in trap. It got so bad that Tuka's mother couldn't understand why her son's memory was being insulted over and over again. In an interview, she said that Tuka had nothing to do with the music industry and couldn't even beatbox. She continued, "For him to be disrespected and mocked for his death, they're the ones. My son was not about that lifestyle. They're the ones who are making him famous and blowing him up like this because they can't stop saying his name. You don't even know my son." She would also go on to say, "How could you kill somebody and mock that?" What's funny about that? As hard as it may be for his family, Tuka's importance in this story doesn't end here. So it turns out that he was allegedly really good friends with someone I had mentioned earlier, Gakira Barnes. You already know what her reputation was, so there was no doubt that revenge was on its way. It arrived in the second week of August 2011. Odie Perry was a member of the Black Disciples and was just 20 years old at the time of his death. Late on the night of the 10th, he was shot multiple times, getting hit in multiple body body parts, including the neck. Perry was rushed to the hospital, but it wasn't enough. He passed away in the early hours of August 11th. Later on, all signs pointed to Gakira Barnes being the murderer. As a matter of fact, she allegedly took one of OD's guns and kept it for herself, even showing it off on social media for all her followers to see. Barnes may have been the one who pulled the trigger, but she had not acted alone. Soon after the shooting, camera footage revealed that she had a getaway driver. While the driver's face was never seen, the person was clearly wearing an orange t-shirt. Guess who had just happened to be wearing an orange t-shirt earlier in the day? That's right, FBG Duck. There was no way of officially confirming if he had been the getaway driver, but it was really easy for anyone to put two and two together. Tuka had been tight with Barnes, who in turn had been close to Duck. When Tuka was murdered, it stands to reason that both of them would want to get revenge. Looking back at the history between both these gangs, that is more than enough to go on. We also know that King Von was the one who took Barnes out, so it makes sense that he would want to finish the job and go after Duck as well. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen, at least not immediately. In the meantime though, just like Tuka, Ops began dissing Perry in tracks after his death as well. It wasn't as frequent or popular as dissing Tuka was, but it did happen a fair amount. Another name that would often pop up alongside ODs in diss tracks was T. Roy. Roy had been a member of the Black Disciples, one of the gang's heaviest hitters, and King Von's best friend up until his death in February 2017 on Valentine's Day. He was shot in the chest and rushed to the hospital where doctors failed to save his life. Roy was a really important part of O-Block, and beyond his friendship with Von, he was also tight with guys like Chief Keef, with it being rumored that Roy used to take care of the rapper's business for him. Keef never really tried to hide that fact either, often giving him a shout out in tracks, and in one of his songs, No Reason, he even rapped, T-Roy got my strap, he gon' blast for no reason. Between O.D. Perry and T-Roy, the Black Disciples had lost two really important people. In addition to all the anger that his fellow gang members were feeling, King Von also had to deal with the fact that his closest friend had been murdered. Everything came to a head when FBG Duck decided to drop the music video for his track Dead in March 2020. In a lot of ways, that track brought together all of Von's frustrations with Duck. Being dissed, his alleged role in OD's death, and the pain he probably still felt after Roy's passing as well. And seeing both men disrespected once more in light of everything that happened was potentially one step too far. In the song, a part of the chorus was, said I wasn't gonna diss the dead, and okay, I did it, but T-Roy and OD, them dead. The rest of the song wasn't any better either, as the rapper disrespected a bunch of O-Block members who had been killed in the past. This wasn't even the first time that Duck had gone after Roy in one of his tracks. In his song Exposing Me remix, Duck rapped, T-Roy ain't get shot inside his head, but he ain't make it though. They got so many dead I don't know who to smoke. In the first line, Duck basically said Roy wasn't as tough as one of his own crew, FBG Wooksy, who had survived a shot in the head, while the second line just mocked the Black Disciples as a whole because of all the members they had lost over the years. It was brutal. If you remember from earlier, I had said that Duck's ops probably knew that he had been the getaway driver when O.D. Perry had been shot dead, but they hadn't gone after him yet. But that was about to change, and Dead was arguably the last domino to fall for the Black Disciples, and more personally, King Von. Both men had been linked to each other for years, growing up as friends only to turn on each other, Von taking out Barnes, Duck playing a role in Perry's death, and then insulting his memory alongside Roy's, who just happened to have been Von's best friend. After all these years, they were finally approaching the final chapter of their story together, and it all went down on August 4th, 2020. In the years since Duck's death, several stories and allegations have come to light, with as many as 6 people allegedly involved in the murder. In addition to all of that, King Von's role in the shooting also proved to be larger than some may have initially expected. Duck's death was a statement from the Black Disciples to all of their ops. Sure, it happened in broad daylight, but it also happened in a crowded market, and a lot more people could have been injured in the attack. Leaving all of the bad blood of the past aside, even law enforcement was of the belief that Duck releasing dead was what led to him being attacked. In an affidavit, an FBI agent stated that Duck mentions in a degrading manner 9 names, aliases, and/or monikers of deceased individuals. The 9 people mentioned in the affidavit were a clear reference to the Black Disciple members Duck chose to diss. Again, all of this felt almost inevitable. Both sides were always on the verge of reacting to the other with violence. It was always just going to be a question of who acted first. Gloves were off. The Black Disciples went for the kill, and while they may have made a statement with the murder, it arguably did little to actually slow down the frequency of violence and death between both gangs. FBG Duck gets taken out. When the Black Disciples decided to strike, they left nothing to chance. According to reports coming out of the shooting, Duck was shot several times, with his girlfriend and an innocent bystander getting injured in the process as well. While the nature of the attack was nothing short of shocking, the rapper himself reportedly knew that something was coming. Police records showed that one of Duck's friends revealed he had been leery of letting people know his whereabouts because he had received death threats from opposing gang members in the drill rap scene. A search warrant affidavit stated that O-Block members headed out of Parkway Gardens, which Lynch's O-Block territory about 20 minutes before the shooting. It was noted that they left in a Ford Fusion and a Chrysler 300. Those two vehicles would be the same ones that would pull up to Duck's girlfriend's car, as four men would jump out at 4:26 p.m., open fire, hop back into their vehicles, and drive away. The entire attack lasted maybe 15 seconds, but that was all the time the Black Disciples needed to take care of their business. Footage from the shooting itself is pretty hard to find, but one witness did record a short snippet that showed Duck on the ground. A woman can be seen approaching the rapper, and he appears to be asking for help. Whatever help the rapper probably got, unfortunately, wasn't enough to save his life. Reports from the scene stated that law enforcement did not perform CPR when they arrived, even though the rapper was very much alive and moving. By the time the paramedics reached the scene, he had lost too much blood and there was no bringing him back. If there had been proper medical intervention, then maybe Duck would have survived, but we will never know for sure. Years of pent-up anger and resentment from the Black Disciples had led to this. 15 seconds of violence that cost a man his life. King Von wasn't one of the men pulling the trigger, but several rumors and allegations suggest that he had a major role to play in all of this. In early 2023, news broke that Von had allegedly put a bounty on Duck's head just days before his death. An unnamed witness reportedly spoke to the FBI in August 2020, soon after the shooting, and alleged that Von first put out a bounty worth $50,000 before doubling it to $100,000. This was backed up by an indictment filed in August 2023 against 6 men linked to the murder. The indictment revealed that the Black Disciples had offered a sum of $60,000 to anyone who would murder Duck, while also confirming that Von had put out a hit on the rapper. The same witness who had first spoken to the FBI in August 2020 also revealed that Von had bought everyone in O-Block a gold chain to celebrate Duck's death, while also confirming the identity of one of the shooters. All of this lines up with the reputation Von had built himself as one of the coldest and most vicious operators in Chirac. But unlike so many other murders in the area, law enforcement would actually manage to find some of the culprits this time around. In October 2021, a little more than a year after Duck's death, the FBI arrested Charles C. Murda Liggins, Kenneth Kenny Roberson, Carlos Loss Offord, Christopher C. Thang Thomas, and Marcus Muwop Smart in connection with what had gone down in August 2020. A witness had identified Smart as one of O-Block's major hitmen, as he had taken out several ops in the past. This makes a lot of sense because an FBI report from the crime scene stated that a gun used in the murder could be linked to a dozen other cases. A day after the shooting, investigators also towed away one of the cars that was used and found evidence that implicated C. Murda Liggins. This was a big win for law enforcement in their efforts to curb gang activity. While speaking to the press, then U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, John Lausch took pride in the fact that 5 men linked to a murder in broad daylight were now behind bars. He said, "Now it's known to them and it's known to anybody else who might be committing similar acts of brazen violence and who may brag about it or not brag about it that their day has come. Things would get even better for law enforcement and members of the Gangster Disciples in April 2023, when it was revealed that a man named Ralph Turpin had also been arrested and charged with murder in aid of racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder in aid of racketeering. All 6 men are scheduled to go on trial on October 10th, 2023. There was reportedly a 7th man also involved, but he died by suicide before his indictment. The surprises would keep coming even after Duck's passing. About a month later, King Von headed to the social media platform formerly known as Twitter and claimed that he and Duck had squashed their beef before his death. He wrote, "Me and Duck settled our differences right before he passed. We was talking about bringing everybody together as a whole and changing the community for the better. Emma still stand on that shit. Every step of the way, Emma be thinking of you. Even dude, you diss my dead homies and family." This was pretty unexpected, to say the least. And a lot of people said the rapper was capping while referring to his troubled history with Duck. This tweet was accompanied by Von actually surprising fans with an unreleased collaboration he had worked on with Duck. But the deceased rapper's mother was in no mood for any of this. She immediately hopped onto social media and basically laid into Von and called him a liar, saying, "PSA, please don't fall for this shit. It is a lie. My son would never do a song with him. When he said he would do a song with the ops, he was most definitely not one of them. This is a disgrace." While on one side of the spectrum you had King Von pretending to suddenly be best buds with Duck, you had Lil Durk on the other end who dissed him in multiple tracks. In January 2021, Durk collaborated with Pooh Shiesty on Should've Duck, which included several shots at the deceased rapper, including clear references to his death. Durk rapped, "Ain't no quick run to the store. They pop out, fire you up. I told my PO through the gate that I get high as She asked me how high do I get, I told her high as Duck. He would go on to throw more shade at Duck, saying, before he died, his ass goofy, now he famous and Shoulda Ducked is arguably one of the greatest diss tracks to come out of Chicago, and a lot of its notoriety has to do with the fact that Durk pulled no punches when it came to dissing his ops. It wasn't just that either, because Durk really wanted to bring the pain. Back in December 2020, the rapper had previewed the track and it caught Duck's mother's attention, who immediately said, "Y'all really showing y'all rich off mentioning my motherfucking son. Y'all rich off mentioning Tuka. Show your craft. Do something else besides dissing music. The reason I took a beat to talk about how Lil Durk has been dissing Duck after his death is because it tells us two things. Firstly, when King Von died, someone from his crew was right there to pick up the mantle and ensure that his op's name would be dragged through the mud, just like he had done to OD and T-Roy with dead. Secondly, it goes to show that this is just how things are in Chirac. Ops die, they diss each other, someone gets mad, someone gets shot dead, and then the cycle repeats. It is kind of a double-edged sword if you think about it. People love drill rap because it's raw and gives listeners an unfiltered look at the artists' lives as gangsters, and there's nothing really quite like it. But that love means that ops push each other further and further through music until someone snaps and pulls the trigger. We've seen this happen over and over again in the industry. The main takeaway here is that death spawns more death. Tuka died because he killed a BD. OD Perry died so the GDs could get revenge. Then when the time came, Gakira Barnes bit the bullet at the hands of King Von because she had murdered OD. Duck had allegedly been the getaway driver for Barnes, and when he pushed too far, he got taken out in broad daylight by the BDs. Just a couple of months after that, Von was dead too. The dominoes keep falling and there's no stopping them. The difficult truth is that Duck's death was actually shocking because it happened in the middle of the day in a crowded place, with the violence of Chirac gangs spilling over into places it should not. But in doing so, King Von got what he wanted. He got Duck dead, and he got it on camera. And that's our video. If you found it intriguing, check one of these out too. I'll catch you in the next one.